So Colin Chapman is one of the most influential men ever in motorsport. In 1978, his Team Lotus outfit had a record 7 Constructors' Championships, one more than Enzo Ferrari had. And Lotus pioneered things such as monocoque construction, ground effect. They were the first F1 team to test active suspension, and they were also the first F1 team to take advantage of sponsorship to increase the team's budget, beginning the influx of tobacco money that funded Formula 1 teams for about 40 years. But despite these innovations, Chapman was ruthless. He often took credit for things that his engineers had come up with. He was a supposed methamphetamine user to get through his busy schedule, and his obsession with lightness and simplicity resulted in very fragile racing cars, to the point where his drivers sometimes paid the price, most notably Jim Clark. But then in the early 1980s, scandal erupted. Chapman was dead, and there were so many unanswered questions. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but like an episode of NCIS, it wasn't quite as simple as a heart attack. At first glance, you might think Chapman faked his own death to avoid something, but when you look deeper, it might not actually be so far-fetched. Now, as I just mentioned, the official cause of death was a heart attack, but the doctor that signed off on Chapman's death certificate mysteriously disappeared just after signing it off, which, leads some people to believe that he's run away from a something. Chapman had just been for a medical to make sure he got to keep his pilot's license and his life insurance, and he had passed that medical. And not long after passing that medical for his life insurance, he was dead. And now this has actually happened. My English teacher in Year 8 had the same thing happen. He was in Lincoln having a heart checkup at the hospital, and while on the train home, he had a heart attack and died. It can happen. It's, a case of turbo irony, but it can happen. It's made even more strange when police have been sniffing around trying to make sure that you haven't been doing anything dodgy while working with an American businessman in the years leading up to that death in 1982. And that business association was with a man called John DeLorean. Chapman had been working with DeLorean since the late 70s to design and build a stainless steel sports car, the one made famous by the Back to the Future films. This car was based off the sorts of road cars made by Lotus and was a rear-engine sports car that was powered by a Renault derivative V6, but only because they couldn't license a Wankel engine. And the factory for these cars was situated in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and funded by the UK taxpayers and the UK government. That money was granted to DeLorean in 1974, and the reasons for building this factory were for the usual "we're going to generate jobs" line. Chapman's role in this was pretty much as a consultant. He offered technical expertise using data that Team Lotus and the Lotus Road Car Company had, as well as doing the suspension and also handling the logistics of selling these cars. The initial funding for the DeLorean company came through investment from some famous individuals such as chat show host Johnny Carson and singer Sammy Davis Jr. And having the factory in Belfast, which at the time was a heavily deprived area of the United Kingdom, meant that it was eligible for government funding. So it was all tactical, and all in, it's estimated that the UK government handed over about £120 million worth of grants and loans and other subsidies to DeLorean to get this whole thing started up. And because he had Chapman, a British national, as his business partner at this time, well, the money's sort of going to a British cause, do we call it that? And the cars that were built were absolute dogs. Badly made, no power, thirsty, no fun to drive, and many other things that would have earned a terrible review from Top Gear. So it was your typical British car. Then they had to make massive changes to this car to make it suitable for the American market, and this cost the company more money. Bad reviews were translating into poor sales, and the price hike from $12,000 to $25,000 really didn't help things there either. But then 1982 rolled around, and DeLorean was arrested in Los Angeles as he tried to sell 100 kilos of cocaine to some undercover DEA and FBI agents. And on this side of the Atlantic, the UK government had noticed that the DeLorean company hadn't been building as many cars as they said they were going to be building. So the FBI made some phone calls to Downing Street, and an official investigation began on this side of the Atlantic. Through some investigation, they found that 23 million quid had been moved to a Panamanian bank account under the name of General Product Development Services, a company connected to Lotus. This money was then traced from Panama back to Liberia and then to New York and also Michigan. In addition, they found that Lotus's 1981 accounts were well overdue, and this General Product Development Services, good reading, was basically run by a DeLorean distributor that was paying Lotus for consultancy. Well, engineering consultancy was the actual term used. So it basically all pointed to DMC is a front to wash money to help keep the Lotus Formula 1 team running. Allegedly, of course. But DeLorean only spent 10 days in captivity as he posted bail. 2 days after he was arrested in Los Angeles, DeLorean had gone under and filed for bankruptcy after making 9,000 units of the car made famous by those time travel films. The UK government then tried to extradite DeLorean for trial, but he never came back. 2 months after DeLorean's arrest, Chapman was dead. The only man who actually went to prison was a man called Fred Bushell, who was an associate of Chapman who handled the financial side of DeLorean. And like mentioned at the top of the video, certain conspiracies start erupting. The first is that Chapman died, his doctor signs the death certificate and then disappears, while there is also a claim that the local parish records where Chapman lived have been falsified. There is also the fact that when two former drivers, Mario Andretti and Emerson Fittipaldi, asked when the funeral was so they could come over, they were told he's already been buried. But Chapman was only ever questioned by the police. He was never actually formally charged and died before he could be formally charged and therefore stand in the dock and be tried and give evidence and all of that stuff. Bushell only went to prison because he'd funneled 5 million quid for himself and couldn't pay the fines and the court costs. In total, he spent about 4 years in jail. So, like I say, the conspiracies start being generated. Chapman's doctor signs off the death certificate to fake Chapman's death and then given a chunk of the life insurance and DeLorean cash to keep quiet. It's then thought Chapman hopped on a plane and went to Brazil, a conspiracy theory that is fueled even further by the fact that at the 1983 Brazilian Grand Prix, his now widow goes over to attend the Brazilian Grand Prix and then spends a month in the country, despite not having been on a plane in any of the 10 years leading up to the 1983 Brazilian Grand Prix. In addition, the FBI and even the BBC sent agents and journalists out to Brazil to try and track him down, leading the press in Britain to suggest that he'd gone to very extreme lengths to avoid capture. Plastic surgery, name changes, even doing stuff to his fingerprints. It's all a pretty hefty downfall for such an iconic man in motorsport, really. But in all, it's a very interesting story. I love the crime stuff in Formula 1, almost as much as I love the cheating stuff, especially when it comes to things like money laundering and stuff like that. But now that I've mentioned the whole DeLorean thing, I am now legally obligated to quote Patrick Keelty. Okay, look, I'm from Northern Ireland to start with, right? So if you're from Northern Ireland and someone actually tries to build a sports car factory in Belfast, in 1980, when Belfast looks more like downtown Baghdad, then manages to come over and build something which is aesthetically quite pleasing, and in the process manages to take Margaret Thatcher for 100 million and still has time to end up in a hotel room with a suitcase full of snow that Alberto Tomba couldn't ski down, I think he's a bit of a hero. So then a look at the DeLorean scandal involving one of motorsport's biggest names. If it's something that's new to you and you've learned something here today, then be sure to like the video. If you're not already, get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on a future video. Massive thanks to the kind folk at Patreon, and if you want to help support me at a more personal level, you can do so by following the link in the description, which also has links to Discord and also to my social media stuff. So until next time, I've been Millward. Have a great day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. Goodbye.